We're going to begin this day with some silence. I'm going to invite us to find a seat that exemplifies or a way of sitting, whether on a cushion or chair, that exemplifies the quality of heart and mind, body, that we're endeavoring to cultivate in this time together, knowing it's a big day and we need to find the support for being present and also the physical posture that is comfortable, that allows us to be really receptive to what we'll be receiving. So I'm going to invite us to bring the breath deep in the body. And for a few moments, remember really why you're here. And reflecting on how much suffering, polarization, aggression, grasping there is in the world today. And we're here to sit with each other in order to acknowledge it, in order to explore it, and then to vow to transform the inner states of mind as well as the institutions that feed ill-being. Thank you. On behalf of Upaya Zen Center and also Niracara in Spain and our friends in Brazil and particularly the presenters and you, I welcome you. And I'm reminded this morning as we were sitting virtually, the residents of Upaya were sitting in the Zendo, but hundreds were sitting virtually. We begin our practice at Upaya with the verse of atonement. And that verse is, all my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hatred, and delusion, born of body, speech, and mind, I now fully atone. We're in a time where karma, so to speak, where action and life are deeply twisted. And we today want to look at the climate catastrophe, poverty, and its relationship to the climate catastrophe. We want to look at racial violence in relation to this, and also at structural violence, at the economic and political systems that have given rise to so much suffering at the global level and at the individual level in the world today. And also how this connects with the pandemic. And our circle of presenters is an extraordinary group of women leaders, of scientists and women of faith.
Mulheres de fé que se dedicavam
sua vida, a world that is profoundly spiritual, but also all of the women, whether scientist or contemplative, whether faith leader or social activist, all of us are dedicated to activities that are directed toward social and environmental transformation in order that we can move forward to nurture, to commit to creating a saner, a more just, and a more compassionate world for a future that is profoundly uncertain at this time. So I'm extremely grateful that you're with us today. The thousands of people have stepped into the circle. We know that some of you, excuse me, will not have necessarily the endurance or the time to be with every presentation. All of the presentations will be accessible to all who have registered in perpetuity, as will the resource page on Upaya's website. So if you can't be here for one or another presentation, those presentations, of course, are available to you. And we ask also that you take really good care of your body throughout this day. It's in a way, let's see, is it 12 hours? Yeah, no, it's actually 14 hours on and off the screen. And so during the breaks, I really encourage you to not feel like you have to answer all of your emails or to find out what's happening in the world. We'll be touching that a lot today, but to actually step outside, take a walk, have a good meal, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself as we move through a really powerful day, a day that's characterized by a lot of diversity in also points of view. So I want to now introduce Noah Rossiter, and who will take us through some of the tech stuff, and then Noah will also introduce the speakers for the early session and the stewards. Each session is stewarded by one or two of our speakers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roshi. And this is such an incredible event that you've put together and gathered. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of it with you. Firstly, I just want to be sure if there's anybody that wants to listen in Spanish and doesn't know how, or in Portuguese, that they right now have that opportunity. So I'm going to ask, let's see, I'm going to ask our Spanish and Portuguese interpreters to, well, not the interpreters, but our friends to speak that to the English group, just so they know they can change. So if you'd please go ahead and do that. So do we have, let's see, maybe they're not, maybe they're doing the interpretation. Well, so I'll just say, if you can understand me, then you can, if you want to switch to Spanish or English or Portuguese, you click on the interpretation button, which at the bottom of your screen is a little globe. Or if you don't see that, if you're on a mobile device, you can click the more button, and then you should have the interpretation options and select the language that you wish to listen to. And if you're listening in English, you might put it on English instead of off, because sometimes there can be multiple audio streams going at the same time. Just so everyone knows, we have, so Leah can explain in Portuguese. Leah, do you want to say that in Portuguese,
Yes.
please? Thank you.
Yes, hi Noah. Hi everyone. Então, pessoal, bom dia. Para ativar a interpretação em português, vocês vão clicar onde tem Q e A, Question and Answers. Do lado, se vocês estiverem no computador, vai ter um globinho que tem escrito interpretação, e aí vocês escolhem português. Isso se vocês estiverem no computador. Se vocês estiverem no celular, vai aparecer no cantinho da tela 3 pontinhos, e nesses 3 pontinhos vai dar para escolher também a interpretação da língua. É isso. Thanks, Noah.
Thank you. So for those of you who haven't already figured this out, we have disabled the chat, so we won't have chat going on. And if you have a question, a technical question, please put it in the Q&A. So the Q&A section is down there also on your screen. Right now, we won't be taking questions related to the talks until we get to the discussion section, which will be today, will be in about an hour. So just technical questions only, please, for now. And then when we get to the discussion, we'll have the opportunity to read some of the questions and have our speakers respond. I think that's it for the tech. Roshi, do you want me to go into the schedule at all, or the speakers? Okay, wonderful. So this morning we had a beautiful meditation in Gate of Sweet Nectar, as Roshi mentioned, which you can watch again. And now we're going to start with Wendy Johnson and Stephanie Kaza on contemplative perspectives on climate change. So I want to tell you a little bit about our wonderful speakers. So Wendy Johnson, Sensei Wendy Johnson, has led contemplative environment and environmental retreats nationwide for over 30 years as an ordained Dharma teacher in the traditions of Vietnamese teacher Thich Nhat Hanh and the San Francisco Zen Center. She is one of the founders of the Organic Farm and Garden program at Green Gulch Farm Zen Center in Marin County. She has been doing environmental education for the public since the early 1980s. In 2000, Wendy received the annual Sustainable Agricultural Award from the National Ecological Farming Association. She was honored in the Best Science and Nature Writing of 2000, published by Houghton Mifflin. And Wendy Johnson is also our dear friend and comes to Upaya to teach many times, has taught many times, and will, in the future, I hope, teach many times, and help us plant our gardens. Stephanie Kaza is a practicing Soto Zen Buddhist and an environmentalist. She is Professor Emeritus in the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources at the University of Vermont. Her books explore timely questions on the challenging issues in climate, sustainability, and humanity facing us today. Stephanie brings a contemplative and personal approach to exploring the intersection of religion and ecology. And later for our discussion, we'll have Sensei Kriti Kanko and Diana Liverman, who I'll introduce when we have our discussion. So for now, I will turn over the floor to Wendy and Stephanie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kigaku. Well, we gather today, worldwide community. We gather in gratitude for the gift of life and in full awareness of the brevity of this gift. We gather in gratitude for the gift of uncertain times, not knowing most intimate. We gather in gratitude for the beloved community, all of us together, that stands and serves. In particular, we gather in gratitude for Upaya Zen Center, Circle of the Way Temple, for your decades of embodied, engaged Zen practice. Gratitude to Roshi Joan Halifax and to the residential and extended practice community that have made possible this convocation of awakened action. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the voice and manifestation of the living world, strong, vital in these times. We gather on the summer solstice in North America, the stand still of the sun, the longest day of the year, the shortest night, the sun rising on the northernmost point on the horizon. And although we are in full brightness, we're turning toward the dark. And in the southern hemisphere, the shortest day, the longest night, turning toward, in the full darkness, we turn toward the light. So today, yesterday, the birth of winter, the birth of summer, the merging of difference and sameness, light and darkness coming together. In the ancient world of Chaco Canyon, in 1100 years ago, Pueblo people devised proper measurements for the summer solstice so that yesterday morning, as the summer sun rose above the ancient canyon walls, a dagger of sunlight pierced a spiral petroglyph standing on the ancient world, marking sacred and secular time. And today, the new moon, June 21st, last night, I awoke at midnight, not able to see in a living sky the annular solar eclipse. I watched online as the sun and moon joined in exact line with the earth, at the apparent size of the moon, smaller than the sun, so that miraculously watching this eclipse move from Central Africa to Southern Arabia, North India, China, and finally end in the Pacific Ocean, we see the moon on the face of the sun, surrounded by a corona of light. Our time together today begins with acknowledging where we stand. So I invite the worldwide Sangha assembled here to pause now, to take a deep breath in and out. If it is possible for the audience, for members of the audience to come to standing, that would be wonderful. Just brief standing in place. With full awareness, we acknowledge that wherever we find ourselves this morning, each of us stands on traditional ancestral land, stands in and on the original homeland of indigenous people. This land holds the dual truth of profound suffering, as well as the immanent truth of cultural richness. This morning, I greet you as a respectful guest, a visitor, an ally, standing on Coast Miwok territory, the ancestral homeland that stretches from the flanks of Mount Tamalpais or West Hill in Northern California to the dynamic edge of the Pacific Ocean, where indigenous culture and traditional ecological knowledge continues to unfold. Wherever you're standing, please take a moment to bring heart and mind together and to acknowledge and explore the richness of standing on living ancestral land. And while you're standing, let's take a moment together to orient ourselves, to find true north, to stand in elemental connection to the great directions, and gratitude to my dear Dharma brother from Upaya Zen Center, Troy Cato Fernandez, 13th generation New Mexican, who offered us this guidance on the beginning of June in planting the ancestral garden at the gateway to Upaya Zen Center. So beginning in the east, in whatever way you can, please turn to face the east. The rising sun, elemental fire, the place of spirit and wisdom. The seed itself knows and remembers. The seed lights our pathway home. And then turn to face the south, to stand in the south. Gratitude for the gift of water, for shape-shifting, solid, gaseous, flowing water, rising up in abundance, upwelling of the web of life. And turning to stand in the west, facing the west. the realm of great mystery, the fruitful darkness of earth, the threshing floor of our extinctions, the threshing floor of our extinctions. And when you are ready, please turn to face north. Stand now in true north, North Star, Pole Star, home of ancestors traveling the great northern road that spans time and place. The home of wind that brings snow and rain and the breath of life. Standing in the north, orienting yourselves in whatever way is best to the unfolding of this day. And let me set the intention. If we were in a circle, we would face into the center of the circle. And we are, in fact, in the circle of a way. So let's face. You can return to sitting, settle yourself on yourself. Let the flower of your life force bloom. And let's set intention, standing still in solstice season. The old order is unraveling. The new tapestry is not yet woven. In this time of rising pandemic, racial and structural violence, climate catastrophe, no one stands on the sidelines of truth and justice. May we come together in awakened action. May we find freedom where fear and courage meet, and may we work together for the benefit of all being. Thank you.
Wendy, thank you so much for starting us off together. I'm glad to be here with all of you in this circle. We're now going to share with you some of the thoughts we've been putting together about our common challenge for this Awakened Action seminar. We'll be drawing on some of our Buddhist background, but also very much on our life experience, the two of us. And it seems to us that we need all of our attention now for today's common challenge. A world struggling with climate change, the global pandemic, and all these uprisings against racial injustice and structural inequity. So we are all asking deeply, how are these powerful events impacting our world? What do we need to be thinking about? How do we need to wake up? Everything seems to be quite exposed and raw at the moment and hard to take in. One piece of news after another, droughts, fires, floods, health in crisis, and one miraculous and tragic and inspiring uprising after another. We see on every level interlocking systems generating incredible impacts, sometimes irreversible changes, and as Wendy said, a tapestry not yet woven. We all know that we've been witnessing extreme weather events and climate disasters. There will be more of them. We are preparing more and more suffering. Rising temperatures, longer heat waves, and more extreme fires that are terrifying in magnitude, even for firefighters who've been watching a fire a long time. So our question today in this common challenge is how to respond. How to respond when ecosystems are being destroyed across the world, when there are conflicts in many parts of the world over food and water. Climate refugees are traveling to find better places to live, trying to find their way out of rising seas. Governments are struggling to just maintain any kind of stability under these difficult conditions. And the gap between wealthy and poor is larger than it's ever been. This is generating stress at all levels. Social chaos, injustice, we all know this. I am just laying the groundwork for our whole day, this common challenge. Wendy and I decided to really try to focus today to use our contemplative skills and practices in looking at denial, how denial persists, how it affects everything we think about, and it's in all our conversations around us. Some people explain the persistence of denial as the fact that we don't seem to have enough knowledge. If we knew more, we would think differently. Well, honestly, I know a lot, and sometimes denial comes over me too, like some kind of a fog. Many people know a lot. It's a lot to process. Some people think denial persists because it's the media. They're continuously feeding us messages that aren't full enough or completely truthful. Others think we just are able to compartmentalize. We can carry a cognitive dissonance between a part of our brain that knows there's big trouble and another part that just needs to get that dinner on the table or that kid off to school. And of course, right now, particularly in North America, but all around the world, we're experiencing extreme social polarization, which pushes each side to maintain their ideologies and therefore their own denial. And we can't overlook how difficult the emotions are of climate change, our fears, our griefs, our losses, our rage and despair. But one thing we do see about denial is that first world denial keeps first world ways of life unchallenged. The consumer mind of first world keeps justice issues hidden. We want to just have what we have and live comfortably and not think too much about what's going on. So it's important to see that climate change denial is a justice issue. And people living with environmental privilege in relative comfort and relative safety will just continue to reproduce the existing power relations and dominant paradigms. So this is a very big common challenge. The health of the planet and all beings are really at stake. It clearly needs our full attention. That's why we are here today. The suffering is not decreasing, it's only increasing. So this rally, this was right in my state capital, brought me to the same realization again, that the time to act is now. We just want to pause for a minute and look at some images and feel how strong this call is in our local homes and also far afield, to just take in a contemplative way these images. So we're inviting you to bring the stillness of your mind today to look deeply at what is going on. Many spiritual teachings and practices are available for approaching climate change and the pandemic. Wonderful ancient and modern earth-centered traditions from all parts of the world that we can draw on and that are being so generously shared right now by our indigenous peoples. From science and also from Buddhism, we can study interbeing through systems thinking, or as Joanna Macy calls it, mutual causality, the multiple causes and conditions that are creating all of what we see that's arising. Many traditions offer moral guidelines based on non-harming and practices that can strengthen our intention and compassion so we're able to address these incredibly demanding challenges of today. This morning, we are going to focus on the psychological, ethical, and social aspects of climate change. The science will come later in the day. We want to look at how to study denial. How can we use contemplative approaches to look at this gnarly topic? And how can we affirm ethical principles that will give us a backbone to stand on as we practice? And then how can we build resilience so we will be strong enough as a culture and society and people to move through these difficult times ahead? I'm going to begin with the part on investigating denial, and then Wendy will talk with us about the ethical principles. I offer here work that I've been doing and that many others have done in several areas. This doesn't belong to any world religious tradition or spiritual tradition, but in fact, they need to be doing this work now in all of our spiritual and religious centers. Sometimes it's uncomfortable and we don't really want to turn toward it. But I have been trained myself in the work that reconnects with Joanna Macy. And here we see some young people doing this work, this climate grief work, which calls us to sustain the gaze and look directly at what's going on, to allow the heart to actually feel the suffering of people whose homes are burning or flooding, to let the heart wake up and be present in feeling this concern. Inevitably, strong emotions arise. But then we face into that in doing this work. And by facing into it, by speaking it, by witnessing for ourselves and for others, we break the habit of helplessness. This work is not just theoretical, it's many exercises, many meditations. It's very available. I encourage you to look into it because the result is that one's own emotional self-knowledge can build capacity for helping others to break through denial and their own conditioned thinking. So this work is work on behalf of others. It's work we do with others. We're never alone when we do this work. Another aspect of denial we know we must examine now is literally unexamined privilege. Some people in the world, some members, some groups have strong advantages already with them when they're born through their cultures, their economic status, perhaps even physical abilities, being tall, just simply being able to move. Not everyone can do that easily. So all these advantages put some ahead of others. And often this is invisible. Right now, many Buddhist centers are being urged to take up these questions in their Sangha communications, to take apart some of the dominant cultural values, to look directly at what is going on when some people have privilege and others don't. It could be the privilege of rank or experience or of professional status. But in all cases, unexamined privilege blocks us from hearing the experience of others and contributes to maintaining denial. This is why we must look at it, because without this examination, we won't get the full picture of systemic injustice. The third area that we feel is maintaining denial is important work to do in the white culture. We're hearing a lot of words now extremely beautifully articulated by African American speakers and other people of color. It's very inspiring to see how clearly the problem is laid out. White supremacy culture is real, and it has established very strong patterns of domination, colonization, and resource extraction across the entire planet. So it's very clear now that climate action engages climate justice, that we cannot just fix a flooding sea without understanding who's impacted and what has been the role of white culture in contributing to that pattern. We must now center people of color voices to build capacity for a more complete and truthful dialogue. To do this, we are going to need a lot of support, and ethical principles over time have been an important part of that sort of backbone to help us. So I turn it to Wendy now to help us consider some ways to draw on these ethical principles.
Thank you, Stephanie. I am very grateful for this opportunity, and the words themselves speak volumes. Affirm, stand on the firmament, be affirmed by the truth of all that is, and not turn away from these principles at any point. Ethics, a beautiful translation from a good friend, moral nerve, moral compass. So how do we develop a true north moral compass? Very connected to beginning this morning by standing and finding our temporary place, orienting so that we're willing to be disoriented in the times we're living in, and finding a set of principles that can help guide us through the deep waters. Principle, the word is wonderful. The prow of a ship, that point of contact which plies open water and shows the way. So how do we, in a principled way, affirm the ethics of living now? So I've offer these 5 great opening precepts from the Buddhist tradition, but once a month at the full moon and often at the new moon. In the Buddhist community of old, 2,500 years ago, practitioners gathered to reinvigorate, revivify their vows. To live by vow means to awaken from confusion, to be guided by your deepest values, and to manifest moral nerve. Find your moral compass. And these are impossible vows. Not harming. Sometimes we say, do not kill, or do not take life. That's in a sip of water, in a sip of clear water, there are so many life forms that are taken into us as we sip. Still, we make the effort, we advance and vow to live in awareness of what it means to be alive in these times, and to cultivate compassionate protection, to learn to live a little more lightly on the land without advancing abusive relations, and to speak truth to power again and again while listening deeply to what is said and left unsaid, and to be very careful and fully aware of the importance of monitoring body and mind, being careful with behaviors, cultivating discernment, or the sifting of what is chaff and what is real seed, the kernel of truth, and polishing clarity. So again, returning to Roshi Jones' reminder this morning of all my ancient twisted karma. And I love this slide in particular. My sister, my beloved youngest sister, lives in the heart of New York, epicenter for the coronavirus. And she is an extraordinary maker of beautiful garments. She weaves the tapestry of life. Her business went on hold during this time, of course, and she and her workers practiced in the afternoon every day at 3 in the afternoon, praying for the world, because the women that work with her, sewing and helping her convey beauty, are also women who have a practiced life. So they made the vow every day to not harm, and turned their attention toward making masks long before it was popular. In the very first iteration of the pandemic, let us take this beautiful cloth, this cloth from Italy, this silk, and create masks, not so that we can disappear or masquerade, but so that the mask can be arrayed and we can protect selves. We protect ourselves in order to not harm others. We welcome the complexity. And particularly, we stand in the presence, as Upaya Zen Center does, the 3 tenets of Zen peacemakers: how to affirm ethical principles, how to look again and again, to bear witness to all that is and not turn away, to bear witness, although it is unbearable, to welcome not knowing, most intimate, willing to be open to all possibilities, and to find in the middle of climate catastrophe, to find compassionate action to meet the challenge. And sometimes that action may mean holding completely still, being willing not to know what to do, bearing witness, and then to awaken action out of that matrix. I love this photograph of the Green Gulch Farm greenhouse. There's Jizo Bodhisattva, protector of children and travelers, earth store witness figure, holding a little clay baby. She's sitting amongst the sprouts of the sunflower world, and she is bolstered by the great and hulking eldest of the sisters, the squash of the world behind her. How much is enough in these times? What would it take to actually choose restraint and to recognize ethically, with a moral compass and moral nerve, that sometimes a little bit is more? It's just enough. And to ground in gratitude again and again for the gift of true nourishment, recognizing that 20 elements make up who we are, 4 from the air, the rest from the soil. So when you pause to eat, find some way to recognize the gift of numerous labors. 72, but thousands and thousands of labors bring us this food. And I love the verse of the food verse from Upaya: earth, air, water, fire, and space combine, make this food. Numberless beings give their life and labor that we may eat. May we be nourished that we may nourish life. Let's taste the truth of living lightly on the land with awareness of climate impacts and our own privilege and capacity to be nourished and to share nourishment with a hungry world. And the deep time view: we can stand and be affirmed by the entire world, but then consider this slide, this photograph taken from above the Pacific Ocean in the watershed where I am privileged to live, where Redwood Creek runs sweet water, 7-mile short course habitat and run of the endangered silver salmon in the Coho line, where they run through sweet water out to the salty pastures of the sea. Time immemorial, this ancient passage, 2,000-mile circumambulation, gyration through the ocean to find their exact homeland again and again by the taste of deep time and the river flowing. So to be present, to let the eyes of compassion observe sentient beings, to assemble an ocean of blessing beyond measure is our gift and our privilege and our call right now. So in whatever way is strongest for you, stand and overlook, stand and look into, stand and be seen. Our bodies are made of sweet and salt water. In the spine, in the column of the spine, upright, strong spine, there runs a column of sweet water. And in the body, blood, tears, and pulse of our being, salty awareness of what it means to be alive, to recognize that creations are numberless and to vow to free them, that delusions are inexhaustible, have the power and the capacity to transform this. The reality we see and know and don't see and know can be perceived. And the awakened way of action is unsurpassable. Please, in whatever way is truest for you, vow to embody it.
These ethical principles are a true gift for us. They can nourish our minds and hearts every moment. And we can also add to this very specific practices that build resilience. So we draw on some of our beloved teachers. There are so many. But Thich Nhat Hanh is somebody that both Wendy and I have spent time with. And I particularly like this image of him holding the bell so delicately. When you ring the bell, you may not know the instruction right before the ringing is to wake up the bell and to come into the presence of the bell. Thai would always teach that you hold the bell, you bring the striker to it, and you pause for a moment to become one with the bell. You calm your mind before the bell so that when the bell rings, it's ringing a calm and grounded sound for all who hear it. This is an opportunity to mitigate chaos with calmness. Calmness is not an easy thing to achieve. We're always being drawn off by the news or by distraction or by some argument or some physical need. So it has to become a kind of intention and a kind of everyday practice to return to calmness. This will help us be ready for what we don't know is coming. This is a precious gift, our presence. Valuing equanimity is one of the 4 Brahma Viharas. The others you might know as loving kindness, as sympathetic joy, and as also compassion. But equanimity is one of the hardest to practice because we have such monkey minds and we're always being drawn off into other things. And with one disaster after another striking, it's difficult to maintain a stable presence and a stable mind. But this is what will enable us to take effective action. So I cannot emphasize enough this calming of the mind-body, this picture from the Dalai Lama. We have so many images of him, but this one helps me calm down my overreactivity so I can be present and help contribute to social resilience. Right now we're seeing a wonderful arising of mutual aid networks in the middle of these other anti-racism and uprisings and concerns about police brutality. And during the pandemic, people helping each other with food and deliveries and mobility. So strengthening the local community is quite naturally happening in many places now. And we can invest in that activity to build resilience and strengthen the local part of the web we're in. learning the local ecology. You know, right now, our local crows just had their first young of the season, and I'm watching it be fledged and fed. That's what's happening here by my garden. But to support our local governance, our legislators, go to their town meetings and write to them, our local businesses, even though they're struggling right now. All of this strengthens the local community, and it can actually be a way of practicing spiritual friendship. It doesn't have to be a big announcement, it's just what we do. But very important in these actions of building resilience is to center justice, to center the concerns of justice in order to build solidarity. This means thinking of climate actions that include everyone. There's no one left out of them. It's not climate action for the rich, the wealthy, the well-protected. It's climate action for everyone. We have to reduce the risk for those that are most vulnerable in order for everyone to be protected. And what this is going to mean, this is a different kind of resilience. And parts of this we're not maybe so good at as others, but accepting responsibility for harm that has been caused. The public acceptance of that responsibility through calling for reparations, through working on collaborations and partnerships, gives heart to everyone that it is possible to build not just local and social resilience, but also global resilience. And this really will take a lot of truth-telling, which is a wonderful thing happening right now, and also tremendous moral imagination. So we know this is an ambitious agenda. It's a lot to call for. So we wanted to close the last 10 minutes of our presentation with some stories that have inspired us of contemplative practice in action, a way to test these things out. And these are just our offerings. There's so many out there. But let's begin with Wendy's practice. Although one last thing I should mention, I forgot about this slide. This means a lot to me. My ocean picture here comes from Rachel Carson. It's a different kind of practice with resilience. Rachel Carson, who studied pesticides and gave us so much of a sense of even the early ecology movement. That little plaque down in the corner of the slide is where her ashes were sent off to the sea. And she wrote about this looking at deep time at the geologic level will help us understand past climate impacts and human choices. So these things together are all about cultivating patience and humility, getting a long view, a sense of space around our own small individual lives, which arise and pass away, but our cumulative choices might generate some sense of perspective and endurance and equanimity over time.
Thank you, Stephanie. We've said many words. I'd like to invite you to just feel this transition, to mind, we say mind the threshold, mind the transition. And just let's enjoy one or two deep breaths of looking at these images. Thank you. I address you this morning as a fierce, dynamic whirlwind of a farmer, a grower, a Dharma practitioner. To me, just as in the language and the roots of the words Dharma and farm, they're cognates: to cultivate, uphold, to sustain, to be upright, not uptight, but to be upright, and to care and to grow food, to go seed to seed from the very beginning, from essence to manifestation and back to essence. This is the work of farming in the Dharma world. And I love to practice with my Dharma Pharma sisters and brothers, human and more than human, true relatives, as we take this work into the world, into the life of the world. And this has been my double practice for 40 years, more than 40 years, practicing farming, organic farming, regenerative farming, being farmed by the farm. No farmer ever, no gardener makes a garden. The garden makes the gardener. And we practice together, seed to seed. So I love these images of this child pressing in coast live oak and letting the seed unfurl and tell its long winding story. So let's move to the next slide, please, Stephanie, and get down to business. This is a picture that I treasure from the beloved work of the Cultural Conservancy, which with an organization, native-led organization, revitalizing native foodways, indigenous life and story, bringing forth food and farming and ecological knowledge. So I have been privileged as a grower and as a Dharma person, Dharma farmer, to work with these extraordinary women right here. Here we are in farmland in Northern California, where we're growing the crops of traditional agriculture, asking them to grow, in this case, the Seneca white corn of the keepers of the Western Door, the Seneca Nation, and the young woman to the right, young knowledge holder Kalina Bray, her parents brought us this seed, and we celebrated the harvest. This is a convocation of women gathering before in 2014 to speak about the importance of preserving native seed and growing good food. And my heart was pierced by their intensity, much like the sun pierced the dagger this morning of the spiral of life, that seed spiral of life. So Robin Kimmerer, gratitude for your teaching, braiding sweetgrass. And next to her, Sage La Peña, an activist and ethnobotanist, wonderful native person from the Wintu Nation and living in Northern California. Rachel Bagby, song mistress and creator, poet, hidden under her cowl of tapestry, and Roxanne Swensel, knowledge holder from the Tewa Nations, from Santa Clara Pueblo. She's a sculptress and an extraordinary seed maven and mother. She came to visit us in Northern California to ask us to please help preserve the seeds of antiquity, to grow the food, to share the food, and to offer it back, and to revitalize her own native diet, to come back to ground zero. She came on a journey, on a pilgrimage, to ask help of her indigenous sisters and their allies. So let's look more deeply. And we heard her. Here we are, here Roshi Joan is standing with Roxanne Swensel on traditional native land, the Sankawi, home of the Tewa people, the religious and spirit home, more than religious, the spirit home of the Tewa Nation, not far from Los Alamos Lab. This year we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb, developed in the church of Roxanne Swensel's people. So Roxanne and her son Porter were our guides, taking us into this territory beyond measure. And we've been doing this for 9 years, spending a full day in ancient lands, listening, walking in silence, receiving the prayers of the land. And of course, something comes of that. In our case, and at the gateway to Upaya Zen Center, the Zen Windmill Garden, where the prayer of life into death into life, regeneration messy, non-linear systems thinking came into reality, inspired deeply by Roxanne and Porter Swensel, by Native people, and also by the braided cultures of the Southwest, and by the work of organizations like the Cultural Conservancy. So here is the first expression of the garden, young, unplanted. And every year, every June, early in June, around Memorial Day, on the very day that a man called out, "I can't breathe," and died in the streets with brutality, we were setting aside land, preparing land to grow food, to nourish a hungry world. Here's the windmill garden. Let's look into it. And the seeds of antiquity. Even in the most serious of planting pattern, we have to have room for the jelly belly beans to be sown, a little mischief like this we saw this morning as the gateway to sweet nectar opened and mischief ran around. So the black mitla tepary beans, the ancient beans, Poake Pueblo from Roxanne's culture, Chimayo beans from northern New Mexico, and just this panoply of wealth to be entrusted to the living ground. And we created an altar to welcome them. A figurine made of clay from the Upaya garden by one of the chaplains, and the full harvest displayed and ready to be ground and entrusted to the ground. Next, a sculpture by Roxanne commemorating first planters. We joined her in her gallery, and this picture particularly spoke to me from a sculpture that she made. And then prayer into action. The beautiful Upaya residents, you saw them this morning, taking the ancient gestures that represent what it means to be alive in these times, to touch the earth, as the Buddha did, touch the earth, witness with your hand on the living ground, the opening of the earth and bodhisattvas coming out to help with the work, and then raising the left hand in the timeless gesture, Abhaya, I am not afraid to do this work. Here we are planting the garden this year. I was far away, but very near. And they did a beautiful job. Prayer into action, lifetime after lifetime. And lo and behold, a rampage, a rumpus of royal ruckus of plants. Squash, the eldest of the sisters, protecting the garden, circling the temple, circling and crawling up and down the gateway, covered with beans, 9,000-year-old sister, traveling, carrying news, north, east, west, south, the acronym for news, carried in a handful of beans. And in the inner garden, Ta'a, corn, the queen of crops. And on the outside, her ancient ancestor. This is the Upaya garden in full cry in late summer. And amaranth and sunflowers, also guardians, tobacco from Roxanne, prayer flags from many people, praying that every being in the 10 directions can come to the table and be fed. And so it will be again and again. Young residents burdened with the gift of food. You know, we ask for 3 gifts in order to practice: the gift of food and material resource, and the gift of teaching that really makes a difference, and the gift of not being afraid to really be a human being and share the wealth and knowledge, to witness it, to not know how to describe it, and to compassionately bring in the harvest. Now the gate is open. We step across the threshold. Are we going in or out? Is it dark or light? Am I a seed or the wind? What is my work? What is this offering? How do I protect my own body so that the world can be protected? How do I manifest spiritual faith into action, prayer into action? And there'll be more of an opportunity to talk about this. But meanwhile, come in to the garden and go forth empty-handed, bestowing the gift. Thank you for your attention. And now let's journey to Stephanie's world. Also, more than human world.
Well, for some time, really, since I was a very small child, I've been really drawn to trees, like so many people who share their stories with me. Whether it's my crazy overflowing apple tree in the backyard or a tall Oregon oak. For me, the contemplative practice of being with trees means walking with them, listening to them, allowing myself to be called by the trees and receive spiritual teaching. It won't be necessarily in the English language, but I will be listening to see what I can hear. Sometimes it also means to study and learn, to read about trees, know where they grow and how they live. And in some cases, a kind of pilgrimage, but almost always trying to quiet the small self that's chattering on in order to be with another being. So I want to start with the conifers, who are my main elder teachers. Yesterday, I went to say hello at Balch Creek and Maclay Park. The beautiful sound of the rain on the trees as they fell through the canyon. The forest was a green wall. It was such a soothing place to be. Amazingly, 3 baby owls were being fledged right then and fed by their mother. It was an astonishing time to listen to the trees. Some of the ancient elder large trees in particular have lived through so many years of human history and climate events and pathogens and illness, to just be with them and understand the scale of time, of evolution, of how these trees became who they are against the backdrop of our very short human species lifetime. Along our coast, the winds prune the trees fiercely and challenge them to even keep a toehold. And of course, as a human being flopping around, I need this kind of strength, this kind of experience. How do trees do it? How are they role models for me in my practice? Even when they fall and break and a limb crashes to the ground, a tree can often still stay alive, still be vital, still produce needles. How even when I face my limitations, can I still offer my practice of resilience to the world? Last fall, we made a pilgrimage up to the White Mountains of California, where some of the oldest trees lived. Here's one of the companions to those trees, a great juniper, nearly fallen, gnarly, dry, battered by winds and salt and sand and snow through many years, thousands of years. For the bristlecones in particular, the oldest bristlecone is 4,851 years old. Now, this is not the oldest of the bristlecones, because that one is hidden from view. We don't want people to find that oldest bristlecone, but it's up there in those White Mountains. These forests have adapted to extremely difficult winters, powerful winds, heat and dry conditions, and have survived over all those millennia. So for me, they are a place of refuge. We actually restated our wedding vows there in the Bristlecone Pines up in the high grove at 11,000 feet as part of this pilgrimage. But after the great conifers came the flowering trees, the angiosperms, and they are a riot of color and complexity, the stories of pollination and the relationships with the insects and the bats and the hummingbirds. It's so much fascination that I can't hardly get enough spring. When the flowers come on, magnolias, apple, plum, cherry, dogwood, it's an inspiring sense of creativity. And I want to practice with what emerges day after day. What's the next thing? How does it emerge? What's the little origami folded pattern of that flower or leaf that will unfold? Recently, we found that in Oregon, there was the oldest apple tree in the West, a Bellefleur apple tree that had been part of a horticultural orchard. And we made a little pilgrimage to see that now propped up tree. It's part of an Oregon travel tour to hear the story of how a pioneer brought the beauty of apple trees to Oregon. And it seemed important to acknowledge that it was here, right in my backyard. Sometimes trees are so unusual and strange, you just spend time with them trying to figure out how they became what they are. This is a buckeye on the UC Berkeley campus that I be sure to visit whenever I'm in Berkeley. It's so old and venerable. I suppose it's no accident that it's outside the faculty club. But here we have some of the Oregon oaks, and they are so sturdy and so strong in their outcomes all along the Columbia Gorge. It's just a beautiful place to spend time with oaks that are so widely distributed, oaks all across North America and all across the world, really. Remarkable in their distribution, their adaptation to dry lands, to wetlands. So in being with them, I'm often also with their companion, the maples, the big leaf maples. And these trees are in their full, just coming on in their flowering of spring, and just brings me such a sense of resilience. So we want to close here before we go to a discussion with just a moment of acknowledging that what we brought to this program was our own spiritual friendship and how important that investment is.
When the Buddha's attendant Ananda asked the world-honored one, isn't spiritual friendship half of the holy life? No, not so, Ananda, answered the Buddha. Spiritual friendship, having good friends and working together, is the whole of spiritual life. So to be a Kalyana Mitra, not just personal friendship, because there is plenty of juice in my personal friendship with Stephanie Kaza. She renewed her vows. I was present at her wedding, attended her in her wedding, and she celebrated my daughter and her husband's wedding just last September. Stephanie was our minister. So we have a deep bond of friendship, but more than that, we have the ability to practice not just for each other in our friendship, but to be alive, not just being with each other, but to be for all beings in the wider, more than human world. So I love that we're at the roots of this great ancient being, reminding us that we'll soon lose our faculties as well. Seeing together, I look at this tree and I look at us and I see our friendship and our human life in scale with the great world of the our life tied with one, with the great mountains and the great earth. So I'm grateful for this remembrance and also the opportunity to celebrate spiritual
So we are
friendship.
closing this so we can turn to some discussion here. But we invite you to seek out spiritual friends, your Dharma companions, your trees, your seeds, the wisdom elders all around us in our cultures and in our backyards. And there's many sources of spiritual friendship. And over time, this is a very rich contribution that will sustain us through the pandemic and the climate change and the injustice which we all must face. So we turn to our discussion leaders. Thank you so much for hosting us. And I hope they're still here in the Zoom room with us. We're very grateful for the support from Kriti and Diana. I think Noah's going to introduce them.
Hi, yes, thank you, Stephanie and Wendy. That was beautiful. I love the raucous, rompous. So
The
Sensei,
royal ruckus begins.
the royal ruckus, yes. So Sensei Kriti Kanko is a Zen teacher, scientist, and activist. She currently works as a senior scientist in the Global Climate Program at the Environmental Defense Fund and is helping implement environment and climate-friendly methods of farming at large scales in Asia with a threefold goal of poverty alleviation, food security, and climate mitigation and adaptation among small-scale farms. So needed. She places deep importance on the need of diversity and the alignment of climate advocacy with social justice movements. Thank you so much, Sensei Kriti. And we also have Diana Liverman, who is a Regents Professor of Geography and Development and formerly co-director of the Institute of the Environment at the University of Arizona. She is an expert on the human dimensions of global environmental change, especially the social causes and consequences of climate change. She was co-author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, October 8th, 2018, special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade. So thank you so much, Sensei Kriti and Dr. Diana. You may join.
Thank you so much, Noah. It's wonderful to be here. Stephanie and Wendy, oh my gosh. I wanted to linger with each photograph you showed like for an hour, and there were questions about photographs. Can you please explain the images? Because the images themselves had so many stories in them.
That's true.
I will get started with the questions I have, weaving in some of that were coming through the chat box. And Diane, please jump in. Stephanie, I want to start with you. We know that you love being out in the natural world, and the trees that you photographed were speaking for that. In one of your essays, you have said, the meditation retreat I'm attending is not about trees. It is about attentive heart. I love that phrase. The heart that feels the presence of others and the call to respond. The heart that lives in relationship with other beings. Would you please share how did you come to relate to this phrase? And why is it important in these times? Attentive heart. And maybe it has something to do with the feminine. But please share some
Well, the story. Yes, Kriti, thanks for asking. I can take this opportunity to thank my teacher, Joanna Macy, who's listening, for that phrase. The retreat was titled The Attentive Heart, and it took place in Mendocino County. And during the retreat, I heard logging trucks going up and down the highway while I was doing walking meditation, and it was very painful. It was like listening to hearses going by carrying dead friends. And I had to decide that the attentive heart needed to include everything. The attentive heart couldn't choose which things it wanted to pay attention to only. That would support more denial. There had to be a way that I could take into my heart, mind, my whole body, that this is also real. The trees do get cut. Every single time a tree gets cut in my neighborhood, it's one of the most painful things for me. But I include that pain. I get familiar with it. In fact, I need to also love it and surround it with a lot of space and care, because so many trees are being cut right now. And at the same time, I can put that attentive heart on the seeds of regeneration, the forest that comes back, what's still in the soil bank, how trees over millennia have continued to grow on this planet. So I can hold both the loss and the creativity that's coming through in that attentive heart.
Oh gosh, powerful images. Dead friends. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much. Wendy, what a phrase that was. Upaya garden in full cry. Gosh, I wanted to dance there. I have one quote from one of your writings here that just struck me so deeply. You say, I used to be an organic gardener, focused on just growing plants. But over time, the garden got bigger, way bigger. I slowed down and I began to look at wild beings in the eye. Honeybees, ants. I stopped running away from snakes. And instead of discriminating between the food grown for humans versus what went to wood rats and bugs, which was actually a question about that in the chat, I began to plant a bit more for everyone. Would you speak to this importance of growing food for everyone and the importance of not running away from snakes?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, Kriti. We are Dharma Pharma sisters, so you know what you're asking, and you know about the natural world, the living world in full cry, in all of its manifestations. We need, Thich Nhat Hanh said so clearly, what we most need now is to hear the voice, to hear the crying of the voice of the earth within ourselves. But you know, the garden getting bigger, my teacher, Alan Chadwick, my gardening teacher, said, you know, there is more to food than what you put into the hole in the center of your face. I love that expression from a rather classically trained British citizen, proper, upright, mad gardener, reminding us that it's not just for this lifetime that we're gardening. And when you see that, when the world breaks in on you and the boundaries fall down and you don't know whether you're going in or out of the fence, you're at the threshold, but you're entering into a world that's much bigger than what you bargained for, very much like the world of living by vow. You step across the threshold and begin to function in a different way, penetrated by relationality, by the messy, nonlinear just mind of the garden. One of my favorite statements from Dana Meadows in her wonderful piece on systems, The Dance. The universe is messy, she says. It's nonlinear, turbulent, chaotic, dynamic, self-organizing, and evolving. And it creates diversity, not uniformity. So what we may think is a plant is always more than a plant. It's the insect that fed on the plant that created the soil and the decay and the brokenness that creates the plant and the seed, and our own intelligence about meeting the garden. And this is, I am not speaking metaphorically. This is my deepest experience of Dharma practice and farming etiquette, the mystery of farming. Thank you for the question.
I'm going to try to synthesize a few of the questions and comments that came in from participants. Thank you so much for your presentations. I have to admit, I still run away from rattlesnakes. I've been able to make friends with many others, but not them. So if I try to bring together some of the questions, one of the ones that really struck me is people have been commenting about the systems of oppression that are creating climate vulnerability and poverty and other oppressions. And there was, you did address, I think, colonialism and racism in your presentations, but one of the things that you didn't talk very much was about patriarchy and how we respond to that. So that was the first comment I wanted to mention. And then there was a second question about the roots of climate denial. And is it rooted in these sort of structural and institutional frameworks that people grow up in? Or is there something more individual about, is it fear that is pushing people to climate denial? So maybe you both want to answer, or one of you, but one about patriarchy and one about better understanding climate denial.
Well, I spoke to that in the presentation, and I would definitely say that the patterns that sustain patriarchy are very much the same patterns that sustain any dominant culture. They're choosing a certain logic of domination where one group is higher than another group, and then the higher group reinforces any rules, regulations, cultural patterns to sustain their dominant position. This is a pattern that happens over and over, whether it's in a family setting or in a government setting or in a cultural clash. So right now we're, white supremacy culture has been that dominant culture, and it has been primarily a patriarchal culture. We cannot call North American culture matriarchy by any means. So studying these, the patterns that sustain this is very good work for contemplative practice. It means a lot of self-education, and sometimes studying them internally can be painful to see where we have colluded to support the patterns. So to answer the question about denial, yes, there's definitely individual patterns of denial. Psychologists have studied this. It's part of how we survive. We can't actually pay attention to every single sense signal coming in all the time. We have to manage what we pay attention to. So we do compartmentalize, we do deny. So we sometimes have to actively pull curtains back to look, what have I not been paying attention to? At the same time, society socially constructs denial. Society doesn't want to talk about it. So some ethnographers have found, in fact, that there's not really good locations or human gathering spots to talk about climate or pandemic. There, you want to go and relax, you don't talk about these topics. There's also cultural norms of how we talk to each other, and we want to stay positive. So you don't just want to bring up bad things all the time. So there's ways we all together, not just in our systems and our regulatory mechanisms, but in our social constructions, the denial is being reinforced. We cannot think of it as bad. We have to just simply think of it as a phenomenon we can take apart, study, examine, and not participate in when it's sustaining injustice.
Wendy?
And if I may, just picking up on that point, I love the phrase from poet Charles Olson when he says, whatever you have to say, leave the roots on. Let them dangle. Make clear where you come from. And we talk a lot about uprooting racism, uprooting white privilege. But in fact, it may be most important if we have the capacity, the energy, and the intention to really look at the roots of our culture, to look without destroying or saying, oh, I'm going to pull that up and get rid of it so I can plant a new culture. That's a kind of innocence and arrogance that does not always hold. I appreciate the work of the Cultural Conservancy, an organization I mentioned earlier, for meeting patriarchy and talking about the need to rematriarch our society, to live next to the plants that are rooted in a world of racism, violence, structural and systemic, and to live with them as relatives, to really get to know each other without trying to change and uproot. And it takes a kind of tolerance and capacity to do that, and contemplative nerve.
Thank you. I have my own question, which is that many of our audience may have contemplative practice. They may have thought through mindfulness. They may be familiar with some of the language that you both used, but you're both teachers and I'm a teacher, and I teach freshmen who have no familiarity with contemplative practice or meditation or mindfulness. They're not familiar with this language, but we need to have these conversations with the people in our families and in our communities and in our jobs. So how do you, as individuals, take what you've shared with us, and perhaps I think I would challenge you to make it more accessible to an even broader group that is not familiar with the practices and language?
Right. Well, may I meet that question first? First of all, thank you for your work and your teaching and your extraordinary clarity of mind and your commitment. I'm sure you're an incredible teacher. How do we make the teachings more simple? How do we come closer to what Roshi Joan often calls come to essence? What is the essential matter? Mindfulness. There are two characters, two simple characters, an encouragement. Bring your heart and mind together in the present moment. You can't have peaceful meditation without looking at some of the issues that we've brought up today. We're committed to not just have a seminar on climate catastrophe, but a deep investigation to go down the system. So I think whenever speaking about contemplative life, all traditions, all faith traditions and non-faith traditions have a contemplative quiet element where you just want to sit and look at that windswept cliff and the ocean beyond it, and to wonder, to be in wonder and not turn away from the wonder and the grief. And sometimes our complexity, we complexify and turn away from the wonder and the grief. And I think any good teaching erases the distance between us and brings us closer to essence, closer to the primary point, closer to the root of the matter. And you know, if you're not at the root, then shame on us. Let's go deeper, wilder, truer into the heart of the matter.
Wendy, thank you. Diana, Kriti, Stephanie. And I'd like us to stay within the structure of our time.
Right.
We need this 15 minutes just to take care of the body. And we'll regather then at, is this right, Noah? Yes, in 50, we'll gather at 10:45 Mountain Time. We'll gather in 15 minutes, but this was such a beautiful way in the earth to begin this day of deep deliberation. Thank you so much. And we'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Thank you, friends.